Some of you may not realize it, but through the trees behind the library, there's an organization that's devoted to making every moment count for those touched by serious illness and loss. I am honored to lead that organization, and I'm honored to serve people living with serious illness in our community. It was actually 10 years ago that I accepted my first role at a hospice and palliative care organization. And I'm a finance person by background. And at that point in my life, I had never had a personal hospice experience. So as you can imagine, when you start telling your family and friends that you're going to work for a hospice organization, you hear things like, "That's so sad." And that must be so hard. So at first I was thinking, well, what the heck have I done? You know? But it wasn't sad, as it turns out. And at this point in my life, I was a very reluctant leader as well. I could not figure out for the life of me why it was that I kept on ending up in these leadership positions that clearly I did not want. And that changed as well. So it all happened very quickly. It was during my new employee orientation. And we had an inpatient hospice home. And I was coming out of lunch one day, and I heard a bell ring. And one of the staff members came up to me and said, they wanted to tell me what was going to happen. One of our patients had died, and I was about to witness my first processional or celebration of life. And so the advice she gave me in the moment was, just be present. So I was thinking about that as I was waiting. And then our patient came down the hallway, draped in a beautiful quilt. Had about 5 family members on each side of her reaching out and touching her. And Sister Georgianne was behind them singing Amazing Grace at the top of her voice. And I was weeping. And they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of absolute joy. Because in that moment, what I saw and what I felt deeply was that I was witnessing the height of humanity. The capacity that we have to love deeply, and how that can transform what could have been a horrible experience into one that was loving, was on honor, and was peaceful. So that moment changed the trajectory of my life and of my career. I decided I wanted to lead, after all. And I decided I wanted to change the culture we have surrounding death and dying. And I still feel that way today. So I'm going to now, I hate to do this, but I have to break some news to you. No one in this room is getting out of this world alive. Okay? If you weren't aware, it's true. And I'm afraid that if we don't do something differently, for many of us, the end of our life is going to be a train wreck. We want to die at home. Most of us will die among strangers in a strange place. 80% of us will die in a hospital or nursing home. You are more likely than not to die in a hospital. You are more likely than not to have at least one stay in an intensive care unit in your last 6 months of life. 1 in 5 of you will die in an intensive care unit with all the bells and whistles and machinery that involves. We do not want to suffer, and we do not want to prolong the dying process. Yet most of us will suffer the burden of non-beneficial life-prolonging treatment. And most of us will not have a meaningful conversation with our doctor about what matters most to us. We want to live well until we die. Yet, many of us will sacrifice living for the most obscure chance of not dying. So healthcare has changed a lot. There have been so many advances in healthcare, and I'm thankful for them. I'm very thankful for them. But I do believe there have been some unintended consequences for us culturally. So before antibiotics, the care provided was primarily palliative, which means it was for comfort. There was a community-based primary physician that made sure we were comfortable, that provided symptom relief, and that supported and strengthened the person so that they could make it through their illness. Fast forward to now, and our care model is primarily curative. Care is primarily specialty-driven as well, which means we have these specialists that take care of different body systems, and somewhere along the way we lost caring for the whole person. We are focused on attacking disease and on prolonging life. So the problem is what I started with. It's a fundamental problem, and it's that we're mortal. No doctor, not even House, can make you immortal. So we have a really deep bias in our healthcare and in our culture. We are conditioned to fight disease. We are conditioned to not give up hope. We believe that we can diagnose and cure all, and we deny our mortality. We say we want to do everything, but what does that mean? That's the challenge. Do we mean we want to do everything to not die? Because we are going to die. Or do we mean we want to do everything to live well with quality of life until we die? So this bias helps us systematically get things wrong in healthcare. So I want to tell you a little bit about my Uncle Dave. Last summer, my dad called me to tell me that my Uncle Dave was diagnosed with metastatic lung cancer. Now, Dave was fairly young, and he was the toughest of tough guys with the softest of soft hearts. He rode a Harley. He was deeply in love with his wife. He loved spending as much time as possible with his children. And so my dad was telling me about this diagnosis, and I knew what that meant. And he was going on and talking about what was going on with Dave and his treatment plan for quite a while, and I listened and listened. And at some point, I had to stop him. And I said, "Dad, do you know what this means?" And he said, "It's very serious." And I said, "Dad, Uncle Dave will die very soon." He did not know that. And the doctor said they could treat. And everyone in the family told him he had to fight. And he did. And he had chemo. And he had surgery. And he died. And never once did he have a real conversation about the reality of his illness and what was most important to him. So he missed opportunities. He missed the opportunity to ride his Harley. He missed the opportunity to be intimate with his wife. And he missed, I think, possibly having the opportunity to have a longer life without the treatment. Okay. So contrast that to one of my colleagues whose dad also had a serious diagnosis, but he talked to his doctor. He said, "This is what's important to me. I want to continue to do the things I love. Okay. I want to be able to camp, I want to be able to fish, and I want to be able to go on cruises. And I want you to design a treatment plan that allows me to do those things." And the physician did. And he tolerated his treatment. And he's going on cruises. And my God, what a difference a conversation can make. So, You know, I feel like my uncle fought the wrong battle. It interfered with his life. It may have shortened his life. And I think we have to get serious about asking ourselves the question, are we fighting to not die, or are we fighting to live? Are we hoping to not die, or are we hoping to live fully, love deeply, and die well? So we all want a life that's full of love, that's full of pleasure, that's full of joy. We want to be independent. We want to maintain control. We do not want to burden our families. We want to enjoy the things that we love. We want to strengthen our relationships. We do not want to suffer, and we do not want a long dying process. Unfortunately, too many of us do suffer. Interestingly, physicians choose less aggressive care for themselves and their families than most of their patients receive. They're more likely to have a do not resuscitate order. They're more likely to die at home. They are more likely to decline chemotherapy and other aggressive treatments that may prolong life, but will certainly diminish quality of life. Why? Because they recognize that there's a tipping point for every person where the burden of the treatment outweighs the burden of the disease. We have so many kind, compassionate, and skilled doctors in this country. And they are trained and rewarded for taking action for diagnosing and treating. They are not trained or paid or rewarded in any way for having a conversation with you about what matters most to you. So because of this, you just have to insist on better care. You have to insist on care that considers what is most important to you in life. We must make sure that conversation happens. We must make sure we talk about what's important to us. We must give our doctor permission to be frank with us about what we need to know. We must listen intently. We must question vigorously. Many of us still will not have that conversation. We hear it all the time because of the work that we do. Don't tell her she's dying. Don't use the H word. We don't want her to give up hope. Okay. Where else do we accept not talking about something as a viable therapeutic intervention? And the reality is that end-of-life conversations do not result in a worsened emotional state. They result in peace. They result in less non-beneficial treatment, and they result in better outcomes for the patient and the caregiver. So how can we make these conversations happen? We have to plan. We have to know who is going to advocate for us. We have to document our wishes, and we have to talk about what matters most. We routinely in life prepare elaborately for significant life events. Births, graduations, anniversaries, weddings, my God, weddings, you know. But we do not routinely prepare for living with a serious illness or for dying. More than 80% of us in this room feel it's important. Yet less than 1/4 of us have made a plan if we're like the rest of the world. So how do we avoid a train wreck? Well, I think we have to think differently. We have to reframe our goals. What does it mean to you to live? Is it just not dying? Talk differently. We have to take control. We have to speak openly. We have to give others permission to do the same. And we have to plan differently. We need to have a plan. We need to communicate the plan. We need to know who's advocating for us. I'd like to share a few pictures now of hospice patients. Some of them may surprise you, but I think they give a sense of what it can be like to live fully, love deeply, and die well. What living fully can look like. Enjoying what you love, indulging your senses, enjoying your favorite sport, petting an adored animal, going for a walk with a loved one, feeling the sun on your face, having a cocktail, and going on a cruise. I'd like to introduce you to Estelle. This is Estelle boating, wheelchair racing her grandson, and learning to play the piano for the first time. Now, Estelle believed that life is short, and you shouldn't let anyone stop you from doing exactly what you want to do. Pretty special lady. And this is what loving deeply can look like. Forgiving, thanking, reconnecting, affirming your feelings, maintaining intimacy, and yes, being romantic. What dying can look like is in a place you love, with people you love, with peace and grace and without suffering. How you live matters. How you die matters. It's within your control. And I would just say, make sure you're fighting the right fight. Make sure you're having the right conversations. Insist on a care plan that's focused on what you want. Plan now so that you can have peace later. Thank you.